broke, and with a family ill and undernourished, constantly appealed to Greeley and managing editor Charles Dana for an increase in his munificent salary of $5 per installment, a salary which he and Ingalls ungratefully labeled as the lousiest petty bourgeois cheating. But when all his financial appeals were refused, Marx looked around for other means of livelihood and fame, eventually terminating his relationship with the Tribune and devoting his talents full-time to the cause that would bequeath to the world the seeds of Leninism, Stalinism, revolution, and the Cold War. If only this capitalistic New York newspaper had treated him more kindly, if only Marx had remained a foreign correspondent, history might have been different. And I hope all publishers will bear this lesson in mind the next time they receive a poverty-stricken appeal from a small increase in the expense account from an obscure newspaper man. I have selected as the title of my remarks tonight, "The President and the Press." Some may suggest that this would be more naturally worded, "The President versus the Press," but those are not my sentiments tonight. It is true, however, that when a well-known diplomat from another country demanded recently that our State Department repudiate certain newspaper attacks on his colleagues, it was unnecessary for us to reply that this administration was not responsible for the press, for the press had already made it clear that it was not responsible for this administration. Nevertheless, my purpose here tonight is not to deliver the usual assault on the so-called one-party press. On the contrary, in recent months, I have rarely heard any complaints about political bias in the press except from a few Republicans. Nor is it my purpose tonight to discuss or defend the televising of presidential press conferences. I think it is highly beneficial to have some 20 million Americans regularly sit in on these conferences to observe, if I may say so, the incisive, the intelligent, and the courteous qualities displayed by your Washington correspondents. Nor, finally, are these remarks intended to examine the proper degree of privacy which the press should allow to any president and his family. If, in the last few months, your White House reporters and photographers have been attending church services with regularity, that has surely done them no harm. On the other hand, I realize that your staff and wire service photographers may be complaining that they do not enjoy the same green privileges, the local golf courses, which they once did. It is true that my predecessor did not object, as I do, to pictures of one's golfing skill in action, but neither, on the other hand, did he ever be a Secret Service man.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Good morning to you. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. I want to thank you, first off, for starting the beginning of your weekend with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine. And once again, it's Friday. That means it's Johnny Cash Friday. So welcome to the program. It's my favorite day of the week for our terrestrial radio audience, listening to as much Johnny Cash music as we can while at the same time peppering in the news and the events of the day and the week. Maybe some stories that have fallen through the cracks, but also some news stories as well. For our online audience, though, we're going to continue in our series of presidential speeches today. Today we have President John F. Kennedy cycling through for you during the breaks. President Kennedy's address to the American Newspaper Publishers Association on April 27th, 1961. It's some pretty good stuff. Let's go through what we got on the show today. We're going to get to some national news. Mike Pence, Devin Nunes, trickle-down corruption with Claire McCaskill, the senator from Missouri's husband. Talk about that a little bit. Then we also have a little activity from the Arkansas U.S. attorney. We have Little Rock Trio pleading guilty to wire fraud, exploited program, assisting distressed. So we do have some activity from our Arkansas U.S. attorneys, but we still don't have indictments of senators that keep being mentioned in guilty pleas. It's like a reoccurring character now. You've got, in some cases, it's like some of the, these are like Marvel superheroes that just keep reappearing in these guilty pleas, but nothing ever happens to said senators or new senators. Senator, see you in 15 to 20. Then we're going to talk a little bit about Issue 1. There's a possibility that Issue 1 is going to get thrown off the ballot, but I think everybody agrees that it will wind up in the Arkansas Supreme Court. Issue 1, of course, is the Tort Reform Amendment, the bad Tort Reform Amendment that sets caps on what a private individual can charge somebody else who voluntarily agrees to take their services. It also puts a cap on damages, puts a cap on damages on life. Also bad for the elderly, going to really help out the nursing homes. And it allows the special interest funded state legislature to set the rules of evidence in a courtroom in class action lawsuits. So, it's pretty fantastic. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Also, we've got some interesting numbers about our public universities, the amount of Arkansans, high school graduates that are heading off to college. Those numbers are down. We'll give you that information via the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Also, up at conduitforaction.org, there's a big thank you to the GOP for putting the principles back into the platform. I'll cover that, as well as at the top of the hour, Conduit for Action's got their weekly quiz that is up. It's about dark money, which is fantastic considering we interviewed Mr. Trevor Burrus from the Cato Institute. So if you listen to that interview, you should do very well on this quiz. Joe, were you listening to the interview of Trevor Burrus? We'll find out if Joe was listening to the interview of Trevor Burrus from the Cato Institute at 7 when he says he slept since then. Well, all right, so we're going to be doing that at 7. And then at the bottom of the next hour, Mr. David Ferguson, the former head of the Bureau of Legislative Research. He'll be on talking about his article that is critiquing the Attorney General's opinion on your Second Amendment gun rights. Let's start at the top, though. Mike Pence with some strong words for the nation of Turkey, the president of Turkey there, President Erdogan, or as I like to pronounce it, Erdogan, because that's how it's spelled. And I'm not one of these guys that thinks that America's foreign policy is trying to get the pronunciation of countries correct. And now that was President Obama's only foreign policy. We didn't really. Was our foreign policy? Well, just make sure you don't call the country of Chile. Make sure you call it Chile, and don't call it Pakistan. Call it Pakistan, and whatever else. That was our foreign policy under Obama, to make sure that Obama lets you know he's really, really cultured and knows how to pronounce the names. Not that that's a bad thing, in and of itself, but it was just, I don't know, it got to be a little much. You could tell he was emphasizing the fact that it was a personal point of pride for him. I'm going to pronounce these countries the way they should be pronounced. Okay, so anyway, Erdogan, the Turkish president there, they've got this pastor who's been in jail for a long time for sharing the gospel in Turkey. And Mike Pence yesterday, as well as President Donald Trump. But here's Vice President Mike Pence. Listen to this, talking about nation of Turkey. You better free this guy or there's going to be severe consequences. Keep in mind, Turkey is a NATO ally for some ridiculous reason, but they are. Calling them out, threatening sanctions. Listen to this. Oh, sorry. Do we not have it? Or we? Well, go ahead and refresh it then. Sometimes Twitter videos are strange when it comes to that. There we go. And if you'll unmute it. Yeah.
There's one victim of religious persecution that bears mentioning as well. A victim of persecution who is not with us. An American named Pastor Andrew Brunson. Pastor Andrew Brunson is an American citizen who's lived in Turkey for more than 2 decades, raising his family there, sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ faithfully in his ministry. In 2016, Pastor Brunson was arrested by Turkish authorities as part of a massive crackdown following a failed coup attempt. Tens of thousands of journalists, activists, judges, army officers, teachers, and others were arrested and remain imprisoned to this day.
Yeah, failed coup attempt. Might have been.
Pastor Brunson was imprisoned without being charged for more than a year. And when the Turkish government finally indicted him, they accused him allegedly of dividing and separating Turkey by simply spreading his Christian faith. Pastor Andrew Brunson is an innocent man. There is no credible evidence against him. Our entire administration has worked tirelessly to secure Pastor Brunson's release. Yesterday, Turkey released Pastor Brunson from prison, only to place him under house arrest. This is a welcome first step, but it is not good enough. I spoke to Pastor Brunson and his wife Noreen yesterday. I know that his faith will sustain him, but it shouldn't have to. Pastor Andrew Brunson deserves to be free. Today we're honored to be joined by a member of his family, his daughter Jacqueline. To Jacqueline, I promise you, as I told your father yesterday, President Trump and I will continue to fight to secure your father's full release until he is restored to your family and returns to the United States of America. To believers across America, I say, pray for Pastor Brunson. While he is out of jail, he is still not free. And to President Erdogan and the Turkish government, I have a message on behalf of the President of the United States of America. Release Pastor Andrew Brunson now, or be prepared to face the consequences.
All right, so that's Vice President Mike Pence. If Turkey does not take immediate action to free Pastor Brunson, he goes on to say that those consequences are going to be significant sanctions against Turkey until this innocent man, Pastor Brunson, is free. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. When's the last time you've heard a leader of America ask you to pray, ask if you are a Christian to pray specifically for a cause or an issue? When's the last time that's happened? I mean, it might have happened at some other point in the Trump administration over the last 2 years. That wouldn't surprise me. But anytime I hear a leader of the country actually, ask for prayer or, urge the country to pray, I feel like that's something certainly special in this day and age where secularism is thought to be the intelligent way to go. I mean, it's not, but it's certainly thought that's the case. And people who think that forget that the Declaration of Independence recognizes a creator that is the bestower, the creator of our rights, not government. The phone number, 870-275-9799, if you would like to contribute to the program today. You can also do so as well if you comment on a Facebook post, the live thread, which is facebook.com/Conduit News. Feel free to do that. It's interesting about Facebook. Facebook's shares yesterday plunged, 20% essentially? Let's round up. It was 19, so 20% fall. We have, this is in the wake of Mark Zuckerberg going and testifying before Congress. Some people say he lied. We'll see if the truth is going to come out on that. I think you've got the shareholders now trying to draw up ways to remove Mark Zuckerberg. If you want to know why, in my opinion, it's very simple, and I haven't heard anybody make this argument, but if you want to know why Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, and they lost all that money, billions of dollars, if you want to know why that happened, in my opinion, it's very simple. The Cambridge Analytica scandal was so devastating, more than you know, and I say this while we are broadcasting on Facebook as we speak. We're broadcasting on the social media platform, Facebook. It's extremely popular. It's one of the ways that most people listen to this show digitally, aside from the podcast that's downloaded a lot. And I think this is, to me, it's obvious. Facebook was in essence surveilling all of the people on their platform to a degree that we did not know. I think there were advertisers that took advantage of that information, and I think now that Facebook got caught doing that, Facebook cracked down to try to save their company, trying to insure people, trying to keep them from leaving the platform. And now what do we have? We have a situation where if you were an advertiser, a big advertiser, and you were benefiting from this extra information of knowing the habits of your potential consumers, you're going to want to continue to pay the same price for less information? That's the question here. Would you continue to pay the same price for less information? And the answer is no, you wouldn't. Well, I think that's why they've lost 19% in a day. And I think they're going to continue to lose more. And I think who knows what else we may find out about Facebook and their lack of personal privacy and security that we don't know. Is it possible that there's information out there that we find out about and nobody wants to even use Facebook again? I think it's probable. Or rather, I think that's possible, just based on some of the reports that have been in the news, these intel committees in Congress who have investigated this. I think there's some stuff that we don't know yet. That's just my gut feeling on this. What else do we have here? Speaking of privacy, the idea of making sure that, things are secure. Rand Paul is out with another article talking about John Brennan and his security clearance. Again, he met with the president earlier this week, telling the president that John Brennan and others don't need to have these security clearances. Listen to this. Senator Rand Paul writes, clear evidence concerning the bias of multiple high-ranking current and former intelligence community officials should make us think twice about letting retired intelligence officials keep access to classified information, especially if they become talking heads on television after leaving public service. There is a great danger that vital secret details may be revealed on television, even inadvertently. John Brennan is no stranger to this problem. In 2012, John Brennan leaked information to former counterterrorism officials who retained a security clearance about an underwear bomb-making plot in Yemen. Brennan revealed to these former officials turned talking heads that the underwear bomb plot never threatened the U.S., quote, because Washington had inside control over it, according to Reuters. After Brennan's briefing, one of the call's participants, Richard Clark, went on ABC and broadcast the government implying that there was a Western spy inside the Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula bomb-making group. John Brennan's careless leak to former intelligence officials turned television commentators helped compromise an operation and risk the life of a double agent, and who knows what other objectives it also hindered or outright prevented. This is exactly why former intelligence officials who are now talking heads on television should not continue to have a security clearance. Allowing people like John Brennan, Rand Paul writes, and other retired intelligence agents to have a security clearance and appear on television presents a danger to operatives in the field, and it's a danger we can avoid. Rand Paul, the Republican senator from Kentucky, really good stuff. I didn't know that about John Brennan and Richard Clark and that leak that potentially compromised a double agent. I think it even goes further than that, but we're out of time here. It is Johnny Cash Friday. We really appreciate you listening to the program. We got a lot more to discuss. Issue 1 coming up here in Arkansas on the ballot. That may get thrown off the ballot. It may not, but it's going to the Supreme Court regardless because there'll be an appeal either way. There's an Arkansas judge that's supposed to decide that by Tuesday. We'll give you one of the arguments that the government made, which is understandable, but at the same time, really frustrating when you think of sovereign immunity. All that and more coming your way next. Enjoy the music. Back in just a moment.
My topic tonight is a more sober one, of concern to publishers as well as editors. I want to talk about our common responsibilities in the face of a common danger. The events of recent weeks may have helped to illuminate that challenge for some, but the dimensions of its threat have loomed large on the horizon for many years. Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security, a challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. But I do ask every publisher, every editor, and every newsman in the nation to re-examine his own standards and to recognize the nature of our country's peril. In time of war, the government and the press have customarily joined in an effort based largely on self-discipline to prevent unauthorized disclosures to the enemy. In times of clear and present danger, the courts have held that even the privileged rights of the First Amendment must yield to the public's need for national security. Today, no war has been declared, and however fierce the struggle may be, it may never be declared in the traditional fashion. Our way of life is under attack. Those who make themselves our enemy are advancing around the globe. The survival of our friends is in danger, and yet no war has been declared. No borders have been crossed by marching troops. No missiles have been fired. If the press is awaiting a declaration of war before it imposes the self-discipline of combat conditions, then I can only say that no war ever posed a greater threat to our security. If you are awaiting a finding of clear and present danger, then I can only say that the danger has never been more clear, and its presence has never been more imminent. It requires a change in outlook, a change in tactics, a change in missions.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue to push on this Friday, good morning to you. There's a lot of corruption in Arkansas. We talk about it. Matter of fact, I was just working, on Monday I talked about how what we really need is some sort of flow chart. We really desperately need a flow chart on the different names, companies, lobbying firms to try to figure out how it's all connected. I was working on that yesterday, and then I came across this story about Claire McCaskill, the senator from Missouri. Her husband got $131 million in federal subsidies. These are businesses with ties to Claire McCaskill, according to Catherine Rodriguez over at Breitbart. They're tied to Claire McCaskill's husband, Democrat from Missouri. They've got $131 million in federal government subsidies since Claire McCaskill's election to the Senate in 2007. Think about that for a second. This all happened because of the Kansas City Star. They reported that McCaskill's husband, Joseph Shepard, had personal income from investments in federally funded, one second, had a pop-up there, federally funded housing projects, receiving money from the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the U.S. Department of Agriculture that grew exponentially after McCaskill took office in 2007. Interesting stuff here. Seems like, you know how you have the concept of federalism? It's a concept where, you have the federal government has a way of doing things, a structure, and then loosely so, the states follow suit. And, well, it seems like we got this trickle down. We got the imitation of corruption going on here in Arkansas. I mean, if the federal officials can do it to get away with it, why can't we? I want to remind you, Missouri, the connection here with McCaskill is preferred family health care. And I mean, I don't have any overt connection. I'm just saying they're both Missouri entities. Interesting. I wonder if Claire McCaskill knows the former heads of preferred family health care. Interesting, right? It's a good question to ask. Phone number, 870-275-9799 on this Johnny Cash Friday, an Arkansas tradition, Johnny Cash. And we'll be back in a moment. We'll talk a little bit about Issue 1 coming up on the ballot this November. We're all going to have to decide one way or the other on Issue 1. Don't go anywhere.
By the government, by the people, by every businessman or labor leader, and by every newspaper. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. It conducts the Cold War, in short, with a wartime discipline no democracy would ever hope or wish to match. Nevertheless, every democracy recognizes the necessary restraints of national security. And the question remains whether those restraints need to be more strictly observed if we are to oppose this kind of attack as well as outright invasion. For the facts of the matter are that this nation's foes have openly boasted of acquiring through our newspapers information they would otherwise hire agents to acquire through theft, bribery, or espionage. That details of this nation's covert preparations to counter the enemy's covert operations have been available to every newspaper reader, friend and foe alike. That the size, the strength, the location, and the nature of our forces and weapons, and our plans and strategy for their use, have all been pinpointed in the press and other news media to a degree sufficient to satisfy any foreign power, and that in at least one case, the publication of details concerning a secret mechanism whereby satellites were followed required its alteration at the expense of considerable time and money. The newspapers which printed these stories were loyal, patriotic, responsible, and well-meaning. Had we been engaged in open warfare, they undoubtedly would not have published such items. But in the absence of open warfare, they recognized only the tests of journalism and not the tests of national security. And my question tonight is whether additional tests should not now be adopted. That question is for you alone to answer. No public official should answer it for you. No governmental plan should impose its restraints against your will. But I would be failing in my duty to the nation in considering all of the responsibilities that we now bear and all of the means at hand to meet those responsibilities if I did not commend this problem to your attention and urge its thoughtful consideration. On many earlier occasions I have said, and your newspapers have constantly said, that these are times that appeal to every citizen's sense of sacrifice and self-discipline. They call out to every citizen to weigh his rights and comforts against his obligations to the common good. I cannot now believe that those citizens who serve in the newspaper business consider themselves exempt from that appeal. I have no intention of establishing a new Office of War Information to govern the flow of news. I am not suggesting any new forms of censorship or new types of security classifications. I have no easy answer to the dilemma that I have posed and would not seek to impose it if I had one. But I am asking the members of the newspaper profession and the industry in this country to re-examine their own responsibilities, to consider the degree and the nature of the present danger, and to heed the duty of self-restraint which that danger imposes upon us all. Every newspaper now...
275-9799. Welcome back to the program. And we're going to talk a little bit about issue number one. But before we do that, this great article over at conduitforaction.org. Thank you, Arkansas GOP, for putting principles back in the platform of commentary. Last week, Conduit for Action posted an article highlighting the changes in the 2018 proposed Republican Party of Arkansas platform. These changes were comparing the 2016 platform to the proposed 2018 version. The major changes including adding back in the principles to the beginning of the platform that were removed between 2014 and 2016. These principles included faith in God and limited government, among others. The Arkansas Republican Party met on last Saturday, And they did this in Benton. They approved the platform as presented. This added back in the following principles at the beginning of the party platform: the power of faith in God, the sanctity of life, individual responsibility and initiative, individual freedom and liberty secured by a limited government, private property, lower taxes to produce economic growth, strong national defense, the personal right to own and bear arms, the equal and just enforcement of the law, separate and equal branches of government. Conduit for Action again writes, putting back into the Republican platform the conservative principles of faith in God and limited government may have been in response to an article from Conduit for Action that exposed the fact that those principles had been removed. We thank the Arkansas GOP and especially the readers of Conduit for Action for pushing for this needed change in the Arkansas GOP platform. So that is up right now, conduitforaction.org, and go there now and you share the article with your friends because people definitely need to know this is a good thing. We're going to be talking next week with Mr. Mike Landry. Mike had a little bit to do, I believe, with the process and starting the discussion on the fact that these principles were taken out of the GOP platform, but now they are back in. We'll be talking with Mr. Mike Landry next week on the program, so you want to stay tuned for that. We're going to revisit this story then. Issue 1, let's go there. Issue 1, John Moritz has this story over at the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. There's a judge weighing a bid to stay certification for the fall ballot. It's a Pulaski County Circuit judge, and he says he's going to make a decision by Tuesday, or probably Tuesday. Now, this has to do, again, with tort reform. Issue 1 is the bad tort reform amendment that we're all going to be voting on November the 6th. November the 6th is the election. And we're going to be hearing a lot of stuff about stopping the blue wave as conservatives, or maybe the blue wave's going to take us over, whatever. You're going to be hearing a lot about congressional seats. Obviously, you've got to, you're looking at somebody like here in Arkansas, Congressman French Hill. Right, I don't want to lose the House to Democrats. Do you want to lose the House to Democrats? I think it's obvious that French Hill needs to remain where he is and get reelected. I think that's vastly obvious to anybody out there. But you're going to be hearing a lot about that. We don't need to forget about this concept of how we are changing the Arkansas Constitution, specifically. The Arkansas General Assembly is asking you to change the Arkansas Constitution, giving the legislature the power over the judiciary to set rules of evidence, to cap damages, to cap how much an attorney can make in a case or on a case, as well as other things. And this is a terrible idea. This is not about, well, first of all, there's a reason that Jerry Cox and the Family Council are opposing it, because they say it's not a pro-life bill, that they believe in life, protecting life at conception until natural death, and the fact that you have elderly in nursing homes, and that this bill was written really specifically for one industry, and that's the nursing home lobby, and yet you have people who are supporting Issue 1 claiming that this has nothing to do, that this will end the special interest influence. No, it won't. This was for special interest. I mean, I can agree, yeah, there's special interest. There's all kinds of special interest out there. There always will be. As long as we're a free society, there's going to be people who have money that are going to try to influence politics. I'm not afraid of that. I mean, I'm not saying that there's not real or legitimate tort reform that can happen, but I'm not about to go along with this. This is ridiculous. I mean, I can't, in good faith, and I don't see how anybody else in good conscience can go along and support Issue 1 after Mike Maggio pled guilty to taking a bribe to lower the judgment of a nursing home owner or against a nursing home owner. I don't see how you can do that. I don't see how, only in Arkansas do we then say, oh, okay, we'll go right ahead like nothing's wrong. I don't see how we can have an $80,000 wire transfer from David Norsworthy to convicted Senator Jake Files. I don't see how you can have that from a nursing home owner who's partners, by the way, with Michael Morton, and be like, you know what, that's fine. He was given that $80,000 a week after he filed a similar tort reform measure. it's very open and honest about what's going on here. People are being paid for this. People are being paid to support this. It's pretty obvious. We've seen it with David Norrisworthy, the $80,000. You see it with Mike Maggio, who pled guilty to taking a bribe from nursing homes. And by the way, there's only I guess a bribee. There's no briber, according to the government, because nobody else has been arrested. But this man's in jail for taking a bribe, this judge. Only in Arkansas does all that happen, and we say, you know what, we'll still do with the special. You want to say that that's not a special interest? It's all over the headlines. Give me a break. Give me a break. Anyway, so we've got a Pulaski County Circuit Judge that essentially is going to start the process of getting this particular lawsuit in front of the Supreme Court as to whether or not this issue 1 should be thrown off the ballot or not. That's what's going on here. That's essentially... Well, here's a summary from the Gazette. The proposed amendment would establish caps on attorneys' fees, non-economic, and punitive damages, while also giving the legislature the ultimate rule-making authority over the courts. Now, think about that. The ultimate rule-making authority over the courts. Oh, this is about ending special interests. Yeah, because the legislature isn't influenced by special interests at all. But, Paul... The judges, they're influenced by special interest lawyers as well. Okay, yeah, all right, maybe, sure, yeah. There's clearly a lot of special interests out there, depending on what the situation is. Milton Friedman said, though, the maintenance of a free society is a difficult thing to maintain. You know why? Because he said it requires a self-denying ordinance. It requires putting up with temporary evils. Yeah, the temporary evils that there are special interests over here that you don't like. There are special interests over here that you do like, though. I want to add that. But putting up with temporary evils on the basis of the subtle and sophisticated understanding that if you step in to do something about them, you not only may make them worse, but you'll spread your tentacles and get bad results elsewhere. I don't know, like an old person in a nursing home not being able to have recourse when they are mistreated or are not taken care of. Could that be the unintended consequence of listening to these special interests who want this particular version of tort reform that's not good? Everybody agrees frivolous lawsuits are a problem. Everybody agrees, but you're trying to fix it by going about it this way? If that's your solution, I'll just put up with a temporary evil. I'll put up with the world not being perfect so we don't mess everything else up. And by the way, this concept of 3 separate and equal branches of government has worked out pretty well for us so far. Are there instances where judges make mistakes? Yeah. Are there instances where you guys make mistakes in the legislature? Absolutely. It's a messy process. But coming at it, and I'm specifically talking about Senator Trent Garner's op-ed in the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette when he said that voting for Issue 1 will put an end to the influence of special interests. I don't know how you can say that. I don't know how you can say that. Issue 1 is for the special interest nursing homes. You have a judge that accepted a bribe, is in jail for lowering a judgment against a nursing home. You have a nursing home owner or the guy who is involved in it. He's even on a board that Asa Hutchinson appointed him to. We now know gave Jake Files $80,000 after he filed the nursing home bill a year or 2 years ago. And now that bill didn't go anywhere, but still, I'm sure David, I'm sure somebody was like, what I give you my $80,000 for? Well, he probably went to, I don't know, try to complete a sports complex or something. I don't know. Who knows? Here's the interesting part about this article. Now, the judge here is Mackie Pierce. Circuit Judge Mackie Pierce agreed with attorneys from both sides of the lawsuit over Issue 1 that the case is going to be heard before the Supreme Court. Yeah. During Thursday's hearing, though, Pierce called Issue 1 a sea change, but pressed Humphrey's attorneys to explain why voters shouldn't be allowed to make such a decision. Now, let's stop right here because I want to make a point. The best way to defend against this bad tort reform is to go to the ballot box and vote it down. That's the best way. The best way to defend this is to just go to the voting booth and vote it down, right? But you do have attorneys trying to get the thing tossed off the ballot. And I, certainly understand that. Jeff Priebe, one of Humphrey's attorneys, said if the legislature wanted to put the policies included in Issue 1 up for a public vote, voters should get to decide each provision separately, meaning the cap on damages, whether or not the legislature should be able to set rules of evidence in the judicial branch, whether or not the attorney's fees should be capped at a certain percentage. In addition to limiting attorneys' fees in some lawsuit damages and allowing the legislature to approve court rules, Issue 1 would lower the threshold for the General Assembly to change those rules from 2/3 vote to a 3/5 vote. I mean, they packed a whole lot of change into one constitutional amendment, and that's one of the arguments the attorneys are making, said there's too many specific issues, meaning you might support one and not the others, and that sort of thing. Now, the attorney, the government in this case is the Secretary of State defending this ballot initiative. That's because the government is obligated to do this. So that's Mark Martin's office. Now, attorneys for Mark Martin, okay, they're the defendant in this lawsuit, argued that the issue was constitutional and that Humphrey had no standing to file the suit because, listen to this, of the state's sovereign immunity. Now, this goes back to an Arkansas Supreme Court decision earlier in the year that essentially flipped everything on its head and said, you know what, there's this part in the Arkansas Constitution that says the state of Arkansas can't be made a defendant in court. So there's no recourse. The citizens have no recourse. And here we are today. So the government's saying we can't even be sued. We're not even supposed to be in court. We're not even supposed to be here. So you got to let this thing go to the people to vote because of sovereign immunity. Now, according to what the Arkansas Supreme Court said recently, and, where jurisprudence is at this point, that may be how the judge decides. The judge may be like, yeah, you know what? You don't have standing. You can't sue because there's something on the ballot you don't like because sovereign immunity. We'll see you November 6th. I mean, that could be where we end up here. This sovereign immunity, that's a ballot initiative that I could get behind. Why hasn't the Arkansas General Assembly, why hasn't the governor called a special session to, in an emergency way, to pass a constitutional amendment that would restore the right of the people to sue the government if the king does something against us they're not supposed to do? Right now, the state can claim sovereign immunity and they can say you can't sue us if they do something wrong. And even if they do something egregious, and I promise you, if they did something bad enough and they got caught doing it and it was going to take down the lot of them, and they would claim sovereign immunity. Because, see, they've come out and they said, well, we won't claim sovereign immunity in these cases. We won't claim sovereign immunity. We'll let you sue us. Yeah, it's like asking the Senate to police themselves on ethics rules and report each other. Yeah, that's really going to happen. That's a really good strategy. No, I could get behind, and this has got to happen next year. There's got to be a constitutional push by the legislature or by the citizens by petition, whatever it is. It'll probably have to be by petition to restore the right of Arkansans to sue the government if they get out of line. And at this point, because of Supreme Court precedent, that right was taken from us earlier this year. The state can now claim and cite the court, say, we are above the law. We are the law. It's very, very strange. The phone number is 870-275-9799. Listen to this, though. Before we go, listen to this. Joe, do you see this? They mentioned Randy Zook. So about this particular case, earlier in the week, Pierce had allowed Randy Zook, executive director of the Arkansas State Chamber of Commerce, to intervene in the suit on behalf of Martin. Zook intervened as a representative of Arkansans for Jobs and Justice, which is that, it's a fake name. I mean, they're basically saying, we'll get jobs if you pass tort reform. It's just such a misleading name. The chamber is a member of Arkansans for Jobs and Justice, which is raising money in support of Issue 1. Several other ballot committees, including one aligned with the State Bar Association, are lined up against the measure. Anytime Randy Zook gets a mention in any publication, we try to play this audio clip. Here is Arkansas State Chamber of Commerce head Randy Zook.
Because I've been up here in the legislature when folks were rattling around and screaming bloody murder, and I can't help my kid with their homework. Well, they shouldn't be helping their kid with the homework in the first place. You know, that's a teacher's job. That's my opinion. You know, well, they shouldn't be helping their kid with the homework in the first place. You know, that's a teacher's job.
The voice of reason, Randy Zook. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break. It's Johnny Cash Friday. Thanks for starting the beginning of your weekend with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Back in just a moment.
Economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. It conducts the Cold War in short, with a wartime discipline no democracy would ever hope or wish to match. Nevertheless, every democracy recognizes the necessary restraints of national security. And the question remains whether those restraints need to be more strictly observed if we are to oppose this kind of attack as well as outright invasion. For the facts of the matter are that this nation's foes have openly boasted of acquiring through our newspapers information they would otherwise hire agents to acquire through theft, bribery, or espionage. That details of this nation's covert preparations to counter the enemy's covert operations have been available to every newspaper reader, friend and foe alike. That the size, the strength, the location, and the nature of our forces and weapons, and our plans and strategy for their use have all been pinpointed in the press and other news media to a degree sufficient to satisfy any foreign power, and that in at least one case, the publication of details concerning a secret mechanism whereby satellites were followed required its alteration at the expense of considerable time and money. The newspapers which printed these stories were loyal, patriotic, responsible, and well-meaning. Had we been engaged in open warfare, they undoubtedly would not have published such items. But in the absence of open warfare, they recognized only the tests of journalism and not the tests of national security. And my question tonight is whether additional tests should not now be adopted. That question is for you alone to answer. No public official should answer it for you. No governmental plan should impose its restraints against your will. But I would be failing in my duty to the nation in considering all of the responsibilities that we now bear and all of the means at hand to meet those responsibilities if I did not commend this problem to your attention and urge its thoughtful consideration. On many earlier occasions I have said, and your newspapers have constantly said, that these are times that appeal to every citizen's sense of sacrifice and self-discipline.
What does the name Triple R have to do with bail bonds? Well, the Triple R stands for reliable, respectful, and relentless. When in need of bail bonds, you only need one number. Call 866-593-7457. Even if Triple R can't help, they'll take the time to provide you with the numbers of other bond companies in your area that can be of service. That's why they're the hub of Arkansas bail bonds. Triple R Bail Bonds has an app, they're paperless, and always reliable, respectful, and relentless.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com.
economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. It conducts the Cold War, in short, with a wartime discipline no democracy would ever hope or wish to match. Nevertheless, every democracy recognizes the necessary restraints of national security, and the question remains whether those restraints need to be more strictly observed if we are to oppose this kind of attack as well as outright invasion. For the facts of the matter are that this nation's foes have openly boasted of acquiring through our newspapers information they would otherwise hire agents to acquire through theft, bribery, or espionage, that details of this nation's covert preparations to counter the enemy's covert operations have been available to every newspaper reader, friend and foe alike, that the size, the strength, the location, and the nature of our forces and weapons, and our plans and strategy for their use have all been pinpointed in the press and other news media to a degree sufficient to satisfy any foreign power, and that in at least one case, the publication of details concerning a secret mechanism whereby satellites were followed required its alteration at the expense of considerable time and money. The newspapers which printed these stories were loyal, patriotic, responsible, and well-meaning. Had we been engaged in open warfare, they undoubtedly would not have published such items. But in the absence of open warfare, they recognized only the tests of journalism and not the tests of national security. And my question tonight is whether additional tests should not now be adopted.
All right, so dark money is kind of been in the news this week in Conduit News' coverage of the new rules, the new guidance. Now, you know, you've got certain nonprofits that don't have to disclose their donors to the IRS, reversing the President Obama totalitarian policy, anti-free speech policy. If you've been paying attention to the news this week, we're going to take a quiz when we come back. Well, Joe's going to take the quiz. We'll see if he does any good on it. We'll see if he was paying attention. Like questions like, may people in the United States freely associate together and spend their money engaging in issue advocacy and other free speech? No. And it's going to be pretty interesting to see what happens. Who is transparency for, right? Is the United States Supreme Court, or in the United States Supreme Court case NAACP versus Alabama, what was the holding? We'll have the answers to some of those questions, well, to all of them, but we'll have the answers when we come back in our Conduit for Action quiz. Also, David Ferguson, the former head, 30-year career at the Bureau of Legislative Research, going to be on at 7:33. Going to interview him on his article critiquing the Attorney General's opinion on whether or not you can carry a weapon concealed. Well, actually, the question was, is there a penalty in the law for carrying a weapon without a concealed handgun?
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk, 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
The question is for you alone to answer. No public official should answer it for you. No governmental plan should impose its restraints against your will. But I would be failing in my duty to the nation in considering all of the responsibilities that we now bear and all of the means at hand to meet those responsibilities if I did not commend this problem to your attention and urge its thoughtful consideration. On many earlier occasions I have said, and your newspapers have constantly said, that these are times that appeal to every citizen's sense of sacrifice and self-discipline. They call out to every citizen to weigh his rights and comforts against his obligations to the common good. I cannot now believe that those citizens who serve in the newspaper business consider themselves exempt from that appeal. I have no intention of establishing a new Office of War Information to govern the flow of news. I am not suggesting any new forms of censorship or new types of security classifications. I have no easy answer to the dilemma that I have posed and would not seek to impose it if I had one. But I am asking the members of the newspaper profession and the industry in this country to re-examine their own responsibilities, to consider the degree and the nature of the present danger, and to heed the duty of self-restraint, which that danger imposes upon us all. Every newspaper now asks itself, with respect to every story, is it news? All I suggest is that you add the question, is it in the interest of national security? And I hope that every group in America, unions and businessmen and public officials at every level, will ask the same question of their endeavors and subject their actions to this same exacting test. And should the press of America consider and recommend the voluntary assumption of specific new steps or machinery, I can assure you that we will cooperate wholeheartedly with those recommendations. Perhaps there will be no recommendations. Perhaps there is no answer to the dilemma faced by a free and open society in a cold and secret war. In times of peace, any discussion of this subject and any action that results are both painful and without precedent. But this is a time of peace and peril, which knows no precedent in history. It is the unprecedented nature of this challenge that also gives rise to your second obligation, an obligation which I share, and that is our obligation to inform and alert the American people, to make certain that they possess all the facts that they need and understand them as well, the perils, the prospects, the purposes of our program, and the choices that we face. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
It's time, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. It's Friday. It's finally here. Thank you for being with us and starting the beginning of your weekend with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine, and that sound, of course, means that it's time for our weekly Conduit for Action game show, or it's actually a quiz. Yeah, it's pretty good. Knowledge is power, and we talked about this on the program earlier in the week. In the United States, we have freedom of association and freedom of speech protected by the First Amendment. Speech can take various forms. It can be a person speaking. It can be written words. It can be performance art. And it can be even you giving money to a group to educate voters or engage an issue. We now found out this week that it can also be putting a blueprint or a schematic of a 3D printed gun out on the internet. The problem is, lately, there's been a big push against the idea of free speech and freedom of association, and some have labeled it dark money. We'll have more on that here in just a moment. Joe, I see that you're on screen. It's good to see you again, sir.
It's good to be here.
Okay, about to say, we're going to make sure the microphone works. So, dark money. In Arkansas, those who decry dark money try to point to groups who spend money on issue advocacy. These groups are typically 501c4 nonprofits who do not directly advocate for the election or defeat of a candidate, but do educate the voters on issues and voting records of public officials. Under clear U.S. Supreme Court precedents, including Citizens United, money is speech. Unfortunately, special interests and politicians themselves are trying to silence groups that speak out and educate voters or tell the people what government and politicians are doing. This effort has mainly been pushed by liberal Democrats like Barack Obama, Chuck Schumer, and Kamala Harris. The establishment's response has been to try and silence groups that speak out. Although they do not overtly call for the silencing of speech, they try to intimidate groups that associate together by trying to make them disclose their donors so that they may then be targeted and attacked for their speech and association. This quiz highlights some of the main principles underlying the importance of free speech, including the freedom to associate together and spend money to get your speech out there to the masses. Transparency is for government. Privacy is for the people. Very important concept right there. So, let's get to the quiz, shall we? Joe, what was your score last week? Do you remember?
72, I think, is what I got.
Yeah, and that was a big one. There was a lot of questions on that one. And I thought you did a good job. Yeah, but we need to get this back up. Let's see if you were paying attention to the interview earlier this week with the Cato Institute's Trevor Burrus, who talked about this very topic we're discussing on this Friday. I know you've slept since then. I know you have. Okay. Question number 1. May people in the United States freely associate together and spend their money engaging in issue advocacy and other free speech? Yes?
No.
Freedom of speech and freedom of association are protected by the First Amendment? Or no, the government can force groups to disclose members and donors of private organizations who associate together?
Who do you think we are? North Korea? Of course we don't have the right to do this.
Oh, sorry.
That's the wrong one, Paul.
Wanted you to have
yes,
some
we have
music.
The freedom of speech and freedom of association.
Okay, good. All right. Speaking of North Korea, you know, they flew from the Korean War. They flew the remains of our soldiers home. It's a very good thing. Question number 2, which president added new requirements forcing nonprofit organizations to disclose their top donors to the IRS? Was it George W. Bush, President Barack Obama, or President Donald Trump? Who was it that said, hey, you've now got to disclose your donors to the IRS? We won't tell anybody, we promise, unless there's a John Brennan up there that are going to leak it to CNN, which, you know, is easily could happen.
Thanks, Obama.
Mm-hmm. So you think it's President Obama? All right.
Yeah, I don't know. That sounds like something he would do. That's ridiculous. That sounds like something he would do.
Which president removed those new requirements? Which president removed the new requirements forcing nonprofit organizations to disclose their top donors to the IRS? Was it George W. Bush, Obama, or President Donald Trump?
I'd go with Donald Trump.
All right. So
because that doesn't sound like anything Obama would do.
Right.
One, which would mean that I would have to change my last answer to
something else.
To George W. Bush.
Yeah.
And Bush wouldn't have done that. I don't think he would have. That's my opinion.
Do you teach classes, Joe, to high school students on how to take standardized tests?
No, I do not.
Oh, man.
Why?
You should. Your logic is this is
it's flawless over here.
He's taking you guys to school. In the famous Citizens United Supreme Court case that made it clear that money is speech, what was the name of the movie that Citizens United produced that the government tried to prevent from being aired? Was it the first option, Hillary the movie, B, the billionaire candidate Mitt Romney, or C, Stopping John McCain?
I don't even know. I don't even know. I don't think it would have been called Hillary the movie.
Yeah, if they would have put
Stopping John McCain sounds
all right. So you're
promising. I don't know.
Okay,
I honestly have no idea.
Okay, Citizens United Supreme Court case. So you're just going to take a random guess.
Yeah, because the billionaire candidate Mitt Romney. Is he a billionaire?
Yeah,
is
honestly,
it just because of who he's related with?
I don't know. I would assume so. I mean, he's certainly rich.
Those family ties.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to need an answer though.
I'm just going to go.
23 seconds. We're going to need an answer in about 23 seconds, which is the end of this clip.
I'm just going to go with Stopping John McCain.
Okay, going with Stopping John McCain.
Yeah.
Question number 5. May 501c4 nonprofit organizations spend unlimited money with no financial disclosure to advocate for the election or defeat of a candidate for office? May 501c4 nonprofit orgs spend unlimited money with no financial disclosure to advocate for the election or defeat of a candidate for office? No, these nonprofits may not advocate for the election or defeat of a candidate. They may engage in issue advocacy or education speech. Or the second option, yes, dark money is rampant and these groups can spend billions to buy up politicians.
Well, the answer is no, they can't, because 501c4s are educational nonprofits. Like they're meant for that.
Okay.
That's why you have 501c3s.
Okay. Question number 6. In the U.S. Supreme Court case, NAACP versus Alabama, what was the holding? That the NAACP was not required to disclose who the members of their organization are to the state government of Alabama, or that the state government of Alabama could require the disclosure of the names of NAACP members?
I don't even know when this was, to be honest.
NAACP versus Alabama. Well, I couldn't. I mean, I could give you a guess, but I don't want to taint your decision. I don't want to.
You just don't want our audience to get onto you for it.
That's true. They have got. I mean, I could take a guess, but yeah, they have gotten on me before for helping you. Well, what they call cheat. They were saying you helped Joe cheat.
You were guiding me to my answer.
Yeah, leading the witness.
Water to horse, horse to water. I don't know why I said water to horse.
Well, whatever. Does it even really matter? It's Friday. We're in hour number 10 of our broadcasting week. So we're in the middle.
I'm just going to say the NAACP was not required to disclose.
NAACP not required to disclose who the members of their organization are to the state government of Alabama. Okay, now question number 7. This one's an easy one. We just read it to you. Who is transparency for? The government and what they do with the people's money, or is transparency for private individuals spending private money?
It's for the government, what they do with our money.
So, if you have not already subscribed to receive Conduit for Action emails, you can do so with question number 8. Then you answer question number 9, in what city do you live? And then we submit and we hold our breath and we hope that Joe...
Paul, what did I get?
I don't know.
Oh.
You got to hit done.
I was wondering if you... 85.
85.
I'm on the
607. 85.7. I think what you probably got wrong was the John McCain movie.
Really? It was Hillary the movie?
Hillary the
movie.
Are
you kidding me?
The Citizens United. Of course it was Hillary. We're talking about arguably the most powerful political family in the world, and of course they're going to do everything they can to try to stop somebody from speaking. And by the way, of course it was somebody on the far left trying to stop speech.
I didn't know when this took place. Like, I didn't know when this court case took place because if depending on when it took place, it could have been stopping John McCain.
Well, stopping John McCain's a good guess because honestly, if they had some kind of John McCain, I could totally see being a guy that would try to limit speech. 100%, 100%. John McCain would be the one Republican that would try to limit speech for sure. But yeah, in the now famous Citizens United Supreme Court case that made it clear that money is speech, what was the name of the movie that the Citizens United produced that the government tried to prevent from being aired? It was Hillary, the movie.
What if there was something in
this summer? Do what?
What if there was something in the movie that they didn't want out?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, I don't know.
Like
everything.
Actual live footage of her scrubbing the servers with a towel.
Or it was just, maybe an actual footage of her making the Uranium One deal. If you want to talk about this is what's so crazy with this whole Russian hysteria. I mean, even the mainstream media, as I was driving into work today, they're talking about Donald Trump's former attorney is now switched on him and is now rolled over and is now claiming that Donald Trump knew about the meeting with the Russian. And it's like, even the mainstream media, they're not even saying it as fact. They're just saying, well, CNN reports that this is what Cohen is saying. And I've thought to myself, oh, okay, well, CNN reports it, so it's got to be true. It's and I just thought even mainstream media outlets, now they're going to run with this, but even mainstream media outlets, they want to make sure that they don't claim it as fact. They're saying that CNN reports it because they're so, I think even they know that CNN is just unhinged in terms of their bias at this point. And, of course, the mainstream media is as well. But, we have North Korea agreeing and complying with one of the things that they said they were going to do, which is to return our troops, the fallen from the Korean War back to us. Eventually, they're going to wind up in Hawaii. I think they're in South Korea. They're going to end up in Hawaii. And then there's going to be a ceremony later in August to actually repatriate these remains back to the United States. It's a big deal. And what's the front page, or what's everybody talking about again? Russia. According to polls, do the American people care? No. Now, just because the American people don't care, that doesn't mean that, it's not something to pay attention to. But listen, folks, if at this point it is becoming clear, if you know what the intelligence community did to the Trump campaign, that this Russia investigation appears to be attempting to cover up what the deep state did and a lot of their activities. Because I don't think they ever thought in a million years all of their polls were as wrong as they were. I don't think they ever thought that Donald Trump was ever going to be president. But then you have the text messages from the FBI agent saying, don't worry, we have an insurance policy. There is so much cloak and dagger stuff going on here. My question is, what was the deep state so afraid of? What about Donald Trump makes them so afraid? Is it because he's not one of them? He's not in the little club, the little fraternity, is it because he thinks outside of the box? Is it because you can't control him? One of the best points that Trevor Burrus from the Cato Institute made on this program on Wednesday was the fact that campaign finance laws, meaning you can't give more than $2,000 or whatever the number is. You can't give. It actually helps incumbents because you can't have that person that's going to immediately get somebody a good opponent and give them good name recognition by giving them $100,000 and really kicking off their campaign. How that helps incumbents. But they said, in a case in point, here's Donald Trump who financed his own campaign because he's got $1 billion, and look what he's done. And he's actually shaking things up. And for me, from somebody who pays attention to politics, is very much a news hound, have you ever seen, over the period of the last 2 years, so many instances where both Democrat establishment and Republican establishment politicians are mad at Donald Trump or feel the need to call him out? And to me, this is not always the formula, but it seems that if Republicans are mad or feel the need to, clarify what Donald Trump has said or what Donald Trump has done, and if Democrats are hemming and hawing about it, if they're both upset, if the establishment wings are both upset at what Donald Trump has done, I'm to the point where most of the time that's probably going to be a good thing. That's probably going to be a win for the American people. That's the way I see things, anyway, from where I sit. And again, I do a lot of reading and follow the news constantly, and this is just kind of the linear view that I'm seeing right now. We're going to take a break. It is Johnny Cash Friday. Feel free, though, go to the website, conduitforaction.org, and take that quiz for yourself on dark money. These quizzes are very much an educational effort in an attempt to, just there's a lot of stuff inside baseball things, and we want to get that information out. And I know if you're listening, then you're the choir, right? You've got it. We're preaching to the choir. But you got friends, you got people at the water cooler that maybe don't know this stuff. So send them the quiz. It's Friday. They'll have something to do at their desk. Send them the program as well. You can get it at conduitnews.com. The podcast is free. The video archives are free, and everything else. Folks, send me a text, 870-275-9799. It is Johnny Cash Friday, and we're going to be back in just a moment.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate very much your generous invitation to be here tonight. You bear heavy responsibilities these days, and the article I read some time ago reminded me of how particularly heavily the burdens of present-day events bear upon your profession. You may remember that in 1851, the New York Herald Tribune, under the sponsorship and publishing of Horace Greeley, employed as its London correspondent an obscure journalist by the name of Karl Marx. We are told that foreign correspondent Marx, stone broke, and with a family ill and undernourished, constantly appealed to Greeley and managing editor Charles Dana for an increase in his munificent salary of $5 per installment, a salary which he and Ingalls ungratefully labeled as the lousiest petty bourgeois cheating. But when all his financial appeals were refused, Marx looked around for other means of livelihood and fame, eventually terminating his relationship with the Tribune and devoting his talents full-time to the cause that would bequeath to the world the seeds of Leninism, Stalinism, revolution, and the Cold War. If only this capitalistic New York newspaper had treated him more kindly, if only Marx had remained a foreign correspondent, history might have been different. And I hope all publishers will bear this lesson in mind the next time they receive a poverty-stricken appeal from a small increase in the expense account from an obscure newspaper man. I have selected as the title of my remarks tonight, "The President and the Press." Some may suggest that this would be more naturally worded, "The President versus the Press," but those are not my sentiments tonight. It is true, however, that when a well-known diplomat from another country demanded recently that our State Department repudiate certain newspaper attacks on his colleagues, it was unnecessary for us to reply that this administration was not responsible for the press, for the press had already made it clear that it was not responsible for this administration. Nevertheless, my purpose here tonight is not to deliver the usual assault on the so-called one-party press. On the contrary, in recent months, I have rarely heard any complaints about political bias in the press, except from a few Republicans. Nor is it my purpose tonight to discuss or defend the televising of presidential press conferences. I think it is highly beneficial to have some 20 million Americans regularly sit in on these conferences to observe, if I may say so, the incisive, the intelligent, and the courteous qualities displayed by your Washington correspondents. Nor, finally, are these remarks intended to examine the proper degree of privacy which the press should allow to any president and his family. If, in the last few months, your White House reporters and photographers have been attending church services with regularity, that has surely done them no harm. On the other hand, I realize that your staff and wire service photographers may be complaining that they do not enjoy the same green privileges, the local golf courses, which they once did. It is true that my predecessor did not object, as I do, to pictures of one's golfing skill in action, but neither, on the other hand, did he ever be a Secret Service man. My topic tonight is a more sober one, of concern to publishers as well as editors. I want to talk about our common responsibilities in the face of a common danger. The events of recent weeks may have helped to illuminate that challenge for some, but the dimensions of its threat have loomed large on the horizon for many years. Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security, a challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways.
All right, so we got David Ferguson, getting him queued up. We're going to be on about 7:33, going to talk a little bit more about this opinion. I want to know, some of the logic in this opinion, or in this piece about the AG's opinion on your gun rights is extremely, it's just, first of all, the whole piece is well written, but some of the conclusions he comes to are really conclusive at exposing this AG opinion as not making any sense. I mean, that's, in layman's terms, that's not in legalese, but in layman's terms, that's kind of where I am. So we're going to talk to him about that, certainly. Also, the 3 Little Rock men, this is from the Eastern District of Arkansas, 3 Little Rock men pleaded guilty to participating in a fraudulent scheme that generated over $1 million in illicit profits from exploiting a government program designed to help distressed businesses. So we have that. That's good. That's a good thing. Cody Highland, United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Arkansas, this is what we're running out of time here, but this is what the announcement was yesterday about this case. I'm still waiting for some senators to get indicted, though. What about you?
In every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society 2 requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the president. 2 requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. But I do ask every publisher, every editor, and every newsman in the nation to re-examine his own standards and to recognize the nature of our country's peril. In time of war, the government and the press have customarily joined in an effort based largely on self-discipline to prevent unauthorized disclosures to the enemy. In times of clear and present danger, the courts have held that even the privileged rights of the First Amendment must yield to the public's need for national security. Today, no war has been declared, and however fierce the struggle may be, it may never be declared in the traditional fashion. Our way of life is under attack. Those who make themselves our enemy are advancing around the globe. The survival of our friends is in danger, and yet no war has been declared. No borders have been crossed by marching troops. No missiles have been fired. If the press is awaiting a declaration of war before it imposes the self-discipline of combat conditions, then I can only say that no war ever posed a greater threat to our security. If you are awaiting a finding of clear and present danger, then I can only say that the danger has never been more clear, and its presence has never been more imminent. It requires a change in outlook, a change in tactics, a change in missions by the government, by the people, by every businessman or labor leader, and by every newspaper. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice.
All right, so here we are, folks, on this Friday. This is Johnny Cash Friday. Welcome back to the program. Good morning to you. We have on the phone line with us Mr. David Ferguson, is the former head of the Bureau of Legislative Research, and it's always great to have David on the program. David, welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me. I'm just a little bit sad that it's on a Johnny Cash Friday and I interrupted Johnny Cash. I'd like to listen to more of that.
I know a lot of people say that, and honestly, if you're a guest on Johnny Cash Friday, it ends up making the guest the bad guy. So
I'm used to that.
All right, so David, you wrote this piece back on the 11th of July, but I mean we've talked about it multiple times on the program so far. It appeared over at conduitforaction.org. The headline here, AG, Attorney General, opinion favoring gun control is flawed. Tell us why this opinion was flawed.
Well, first of all, I have to say the title of it was a compromise. It was probably going to say something like Attorney General lies, but I try to be a little bit diplomatic from time to time. The opinion, what we're talking about is whether a person must have a concealed carry license to carry a handgun, or whether the change in 1993 now allows you to carry open, which has been acknowledged by the Attorney General, or concealed. And, of course, if it's concealed, there's fewer liberals that lose their minds. But the opinion, her opinion 2015 was flawed in that it just assumed, well, there's a concealed carry law, so therefore it must be illegal to carry without a license. Well, it's just not correct. Where we used to be before 2013 was if you were carrying a handgun for self-defense, you were guilty of the crime of carrying a weapon. It didn't matter what your intent was. It was just illegal unless there was an exception, and basically the exception people talked about was being on a journey. And you say, okay, I'm going from Sharp County to down to Texarkana and up to Fayetteville. I must be on a journey. Well, if that was your normal route, sales route or something, the court come back and say, nope, you're still guilty. So it was a real mess. And in '95, they came across with the concealed carry license, which not only does it not have any penalties for not getting a license, it doesn't ever really say that you're authorized to carry. The only authorization was an exception that was added that same session to say if you're in your car and you have a concealed carry license, that's a defense against carrying a weapon. That was the only thing. So, everybody just assumed that it was okay. So that's the situation we were in. 2013 comes along, and it injects a new thing into it, and that is intent. What was your intent? If you were carrying for self-defense, obviously that's not an unlawful intent. Before that, it didn't matter what your intent was; you were guilty. So the Attorney General was asked about it in 2015 and came up with this idea: open carry is fine, but concealed carry without a license is not allowed. Senator Linda Collins Smith came back and said, whoa, I don't see anything in the law that says you're prohibited from carrying concealed, that the concealed carry law doesn't have anything in it. Attorney General says, you're correct. There is no prohibition, there's no penalty in the concealed carry law. But it came up the idea of it's implied. Because it's a license, it's implied. And I'm going to just make it real short and get into the real meat of it, but the idea that you can have laws that are just implied out of thin air is just completely contrary to the legal system we have in America. We have due process. We expect, to be judged on our laws. We have, because of that, we have principles that says, where there's not a penalty, there's not a penalty without a law, so there's no penalty, so you can't apply one.
Is there any law school that teaches this concept of, well, it's implied?
No, if it did, it'd be wrong.
Okay, yeah, that's my point. That's how far outside the realm of just saying, well, it's implied.
Yeah, and I one more mention on these principles. One of the first is you get into criminal law your very first year in law school, and one of the things you're taught is if the law is ambiguous, you don't imply a penalty against somebody. If it's ambiguous, you imply it against the government, and it's going to be in favor of the person being prosecuted. So the idea that there is no prohibition, but we're going to imply one, just seems to go contrary to everything that you would expect from our legal system.
So, just to be clear, the first couple sentences of her opinion, she admits that there is no penalty in the law for carrying a weapon without a concealed handgun license. To be clear, she did say that at the beginning.
And then goes into this implied stuff. But here's the thing that just really, I've disagreed with attorney generals before. I worked for the legislature for 30 years, and I helped legislate towards their opinion requests, and sometimes they come back with something bizarre. This has an element in it I have never seen before. And when I read this, I thought there was some staffer over there that was about to get fired. And I really looked at this over and over again because, to me, knowing how they normally do it, a staff person in the AG's office prepares an opinion. They give it to the Attorney General. They discuss it. They make modifications. I assumed that some staffer made up a bunch of junk and gave it to the Attorney General. You know, I'm a Republican, so I don't have any place to turn. So I have to, you know, think that way, that it's not the Attorney General, it was somebody in her office that gave her this stuff. But there's not been any effort to try to correct the problem. And here is the problem. What I've never seen before is there are two instances in the opinion where they were trying to support an argument for an implied prohibition, that they used, they stated the law and stated it falsely. And if I can state the law falsely, I can win every opinion. You know, I just make it as I want. And so there are two major problems in there. One, they were saying, well, this idea of an implied prohibition is supported because in the concealed carry law, it even says that it is the, in quote, legal method for carrying a handgun. Well, that sounds pretty good, but it says it's the method. No, that's not true. That's false. That's a lie. What it says is when you're applying for a license, one of the statements you're supposed to say is, you know, they're asking, why do you want a concealed carry license? And you're supposed to say, because I want a legal method for carrying. It never says it's the, and this whole argument is based on it being the legal method. So that is a complete misrepresentation.
And in the opinion, they actually misquote it, right? They quote it as the legal method, but the actual statute says a legal method.
Well, it does say a legal method. They don't misquote it. They selectively edit it so that the word "the" is part of their sentence, and then they quote after the "the." So they cut out the "a" in order to put in a "the" that's not a part of the quote.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
The other thing that just blew my mind was in the previous opinion, 2015, the Attorney General had cited a presumption in case law, and if you look at the article I wrote earlier in July, there'll be a cite to it. There's a case called McGregor, and in it, the court said, hey, we've got this guy that's traveling along, and in his car he's got this loaded handgun. And the statute says that you have to prove that the person was carrying for the purpose of it being a weapon against another person. Didn't matter if it was self-defense. As a weapon against another person, they said, well, you can presume that if you have a loaded weapon, it's there to be used against another person. And again, it doesn't matter whether it was a good, self-defense or whatever. That was just the law. So that was the presumption. And in 2015, the Attorney General made a decent statement of what that presumption is. Suddenly, in 2018, when there's really a challenge to, hey, you're going to have to hang your hat on this. You can't just say that we have a concealed carry law and it must prohibit it. They changed the presumption, and they didn't quote it, but they quoted the same case and then said that it could be a court might say that because you're carrying a concealed weapon, then you are carrying it as a weapon against another person and with an unlawful intent. That's completely made up. It doesn't appear anywhere close in that opinion from 1979.
Can I ask a question?
That's the second instance where they just make up stuff.
Yeah, so in the opinion, it cites a case that previously she used differently. So does that undermine the 2015 opinion that basically said, hey, yeah, open carry is a real thing?
No, the open carry, was pretty simple. When you look how the law has changed, you now have to say, the prosecutor has to show you have some kind of illegal intent. I mean, like if you've just been in a barroom fight with somebody and you've chased them down and you've got your pistol there and you're walking across the yard with that pistol, sure, you have an illegal intent. You can find that. But if you have someone who, let's take, for instance, a woman who's been beat up several times by her boyfriend, who's, now she has a court order against him, and she decides that she wants to carry a handgun in her purse. Well, obviously she's doing that for self-defense. And until the 2013 law came along, it was illegal for her to have it in her purse or on her side or anything. She was just stuck. Well, she could get a concealed carry license after 1995 and wait all that period and all that training and all that stuff to get one to protect herself. 2013 comes along and says, you've got to have an illegal intent before this thing kicks in. So if she's carrying for self-defense, she's carrying for self-defense. The way the AG would have it is that, well, if she wants to strap it on her side and go to work with a pistol on her side, that's fine. But if she wants to put it in her purse and keep it out of view and not make a big deal out of it, she's out of luck. Now, again, if that's the way the law was, that's fine. Whatever the law says, but the law doesn't say that. The law says you're okay unless you have an unlawful intent. So with this change, you can defend yourself. The woman with a restraining order can defend herself without worrying. Now the question is, can you put it in your purse? And I don't see any way that the law would tell us. I don't see a confusion. I don't see how the law tells us anything different other than that woman can protect herself by putting it in her purse.
Yes. We're talking,
but the AG comes up with this deal of there's an implied presumption. It's like we're on double secret probation. We could never figure out what there might be implied in the law if that's the way the law went.
Double secret probation.
We have certainty, not.
We're talking with David Ferguson, 30 years at the Bureau of Legislative Research. In your critique, in your article of this, you talk about a specific argument that's unworkable. Let's apply the opinion's logic, you write, to another item on the list. Item C1 says a person can carry a handgun in his or her own dwelling or place of business or on property in which he or she has a possessory or proprietary interest, end quote. But
right.
Go ahead.
I can kind of explain it in a nutshell. There was the implied argument, that just because you use the word license, of course the legislature decides what a license means. That was one argument. The other argument is, well, there's this presumption, which the presumption does not apply. And the third argument was, well, in the concealed carry law, there is a list of authorized places where you can use, or places or circumstances where you can have a handgun without it being carrying a weapon. Again, with unlawful intent. But what the situation was, all that was in there because before you were guilty unless you could prove a defense, and these things were defenses. And so the drafter looked at it and thought, well, I don't need these anymore. I can just take them out. Well, what if somebody asks why we didn't have them in there? Well, I'll just make them as positive statements. So there's this list of positive statements, like the one you said you can carry on your own property. And the way the AG says, well, there's one in there that says you can carry with a concealed handgun license. It used to just say in your car, but they changed it in 2013 to anywhere. So she says, well, it says you can carry you can carry with a concealed carry license, but it doesn't say you can carry without it. So therefore, since it's not on the list, let's strike it out. Well, no, those are positive statements left over, converted from before. And the way you can show that it doesn't work is on this one dealing with carrying a handgun on your own land. Well, two things real quick. One, your buddy says, hey, come over, we'll go four-wheeling on the land, we'll check out some stuff, and we'll do some target practice. Bring your handgun. Well, now you're on his land. You're not on public land. You're on his land. If you interpret the way the Attorney General did, being on somebody's land with an invitation is illegal. Going to a gun range, and paying your money to use the gun range, you're illegal because you're not on your land. That's how silly that idea is. And then when you look at it, it does say, that you can carry in your own house. But wait, she's saying since concealed carry without a license is supposedly impliedly illegal, let's say that you have your pistol in your purse, in your house, next to your chair. Well, under that logic, that person would be violating the law for having a concealed handgun in their own house. So that argument just makes no sense.
So you've done an excellent job, David. I mean, you've done an excellent job in this article. Where do we go from here? I mean, we're running out of time here. What's next in this step?
Well, the end game for the people against the Second Amendment is just to claim confusion. Don't ever address the errors and correct this thing. Claim confusion, get them to come back in the legislature, and then start tinkering with it until we don't have a right to carry anymore, open or concealed. So that's the end game, is just keep the confusion going. But it would be a whole lot simpler if the AG would just say, look, somebody in my office messed up. I know I had it for 6 months, but they still messed up. Let's move on, and let's correct this. And it doesn't matter whether we like the law or dislike the law. Or the Attorney General's job in this instance is interpreting what the law says. And when you start making up stuff to support your arguments, that's not interpreting the law. So I'm disappointed, but I'm still hopeful, especially since I'm a Republican, that this thing will be fixed.
Yeah.
And if the people don't want this, there's always some other time that they can change it. But this is what the law says.
Yeah, I agree. David Ferguson, I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to have you on the program. You have a great weekend, okay?
Thank you very much.
All right.
Get back to Johnny Cash.
All right, we will. We're going to do that right now. Folks, the truth of the matter is, if you read the statute the way it is in its plain text, constitutional carry is a reality for the state of Arkansas, open or concealed without a permit. The only reason you would need one of those permits is to travel outside the state of Arkansas to conceal your weapon and travel to protect yourself and your family. We've got to take a break. Back in just a moment.
On guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. It conducts the Cold War, in short, with a wartime discipline no democracy would ever hope or wish to match.
What does the name Triple
Nevertheless,
R have to do
every
with
democracy
well, the Triple R
recognizes the necessary restraints of national.
When in need of bail bonds, you only need one number. Call 866-593-7457. Even if Triple R can't help, they'll take the time to provide you with the numbers of other bond companies in your area that can be of service. That's why they're the hub of Arkansas bail bonds. Triple R Bail Bonds has an app, they're paperless, and always reliable, respectful, and relentless.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed roller lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com.
This is Representative Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment. From the beginning, authors of our Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, and the Federalist Papers advocated the general election of people who possess wisdom, discernment, and loyalty to their constituents. Why? The people expect their representatives to uphold their promises. The representatives recognize the honor bestowed by these constituents. Advancement comes from their followers, not the government. Elections are frequent, and accountability is a compelling factor to loyalty and support from constituents. From a July 5th, 1929 speech by President Calvin Coolidge. This is Representative Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment.
Paid for by Sullivan for Arkansas.
On guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. It conducts the Cold War in short, with a wartime discipline no democracy would ever hope or wish to match. Nevertheless, every democracy recognizes the necessary restraints of national security, and the question remains whether those restraints need to be more strictly observed if we are to oppose this kind of attack as well as outright invasion. For the facts of the matter are that this nation's foes
all right, folks, we really
have openly boasted
it's been,
of acquiring through our
fantastic,
newspapers
to have you guys listening and starting the beginning of your weekend with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. This broadcast is available over at conduitnews.com. Check it out. Somebody, John, on Facebook, what does BLR stand for? Bureau of Legislative Research. That's what it stands for. Let's see, what else do we have? Well, see, I had somebody just say thank you real quick. Hang on. Who said thank you on Facebook? The scroll's going too fast. Pamela writes, Paul, great program today. Thanks and have a great weekend. Everybody out there, you guys too. I hope it's fantastic for everybody out there. Just to kind of recap, Rand Paul with an op-ed, Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, saying that there's clear evidence that John Brennan does not need to maintain his security clearance, especially if you're monetizing that authority for money to be a talking head on CNN. Really good stuff. We talked about that at 6. You can get that first hour podcast. And also, anyway, we've got to wrap things up here. Go check out the Conduit for Action quiz. That was really good, too. So we will see you guys on Monday. Arkansas, be safe.